Welcome, welcome, folks. Today is Tuesday, August the 19th. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis. Thanks for joining us as we continue to follow the evolution of Hurricane Erin as it tracks again off the coast of the U.S. East Coast. But we are already starting to see some impacts, so we're going to get into that tonight on HHL. Here's the rundown. Well, Erin's slightly weaker, Category 2 at the 8 o'clock advisory, but it has grown in size. It's about 2.5 times the size it was when it was at its strongest as a Category 5 early Saturday morning. Now, overall, the forecast track going forward does remain on track here. Okay, we've got it staying off the eastern seaboard. Its closest approach would probably be within 150 to 200 miles to the east of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Its closest approach. Now, fringe effects are already being felt. We're going to look at some live cameras and check in with our live reporter down in Buxton in the Outer Banks. That we already have some instances of overwash on NC-12, and that makes you think the biggest waves, the biggest impacts, aren't getting there until about 36 hours from now, with Erin still way down to the south and southeast of that location. And then we're going to finish up today's video talking about a pair of tropical waves. There are two of them out there now that we're going to need to monitor over the next week to 10 days. They are once again coming out of the main development region, which this time of the year is much more active, heading in towards the peak of the season. So a recap of the wind history of Erin. Of course, it had a monumental increase in intensity in just a 24-hour time span, from a tropical storm all the way up to a Category 5. That type of intensity is just not easily maintained, so we did see it come down a little bit with an eyewall replacement cycle, plateau for a little while, still at a Cat 3 major hurricane as we were into Saturday night and Sunday, and then we were on a slow intensification trend where it peaked again yesterday as a Category 4 and since has come down to a Category 2. And that's where we find Hurricane Erin this evening as of the 8 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. 105-mile-per-hour winds. That puts it as a medium-grade Category 2 storm. Gusts up to around 125. Now, it is moving still rather slowly, only at 10 miles per hour, but now it's moving more due north than northwest. It was on a west-northwest trajectory for a while, but it seems to have taken that turn to the north, which has been anticipated, maybe a little bit later than anticipated, but still, nonetheless, has made that turn to the north. And just notice the size of this storm. It is taking up a large portion of the southwestern Atlantic, with its wind field growing in size as well. Now, a few changes have occurred today. It did interact with some dry air and some wind shear feeding that dry air, getting it entrained into the circulation. Now, think of this as a kind of an engine sputtering after not getting some gas. Okay, think of it that way. This dry air on the water vapor imagery indicated by the rust color and the yellow shades here, and you can see it in the first couple frames kind of getting injected into that circulation with Erin here. In the last couple of frames here, it looks to have resolved that. We are looking to see a little bit of an increase in some convection most recently, and it is actually projected to increase intensity a little bit in terms of maximum sustained winds as we go forward, as it gains latitude and it encounters a little bit more favorable jet stream dynamics aloft, so the upper level pattern is a little more favorable out ahead of it off to the north. But as I mentioned, 105-mile-per-hour winds puts it firmly in the Category 2 status here on the Saffir-Simpson scale as it moves to the north-northwest at 10 miles per hour. Again, here's a look at its past track. It was moving pretty much due west for a little while this weekend, and then has slowly been gaining latitude and is now a pretty obvious turn to the north here as it maintains a Category 2 status. A loop back of infrared satellite imagery here over the last 24 hours. And again, why we like to use the infrared is it tells us, it doesn't kind of, it does, tells us the temperatures of the cloud tops, and that's important for tropical systems because it indicates where the strongest convection is. Colder cloud tops, stronger thunderstorm convection. And that's indicated here by the shades of white that show on up. And when it was a Category 5, we have shades of pink, which was extremely cold cloud tops all wrapped around the core of Erin. And you can see at this time it's a little bit more lopsided, asymmetrical here, with the more favorable convection and dynamics on the eastern side of the storm, with that western wind shear taking a pretty substantial bite out of its impacts on the on the western side of the storm. A look back at the visible satellite, again, still a very formidable storm. Even though it's dropped a couple categories, it's still a very large storm, a very powerful storm. And all of that wind energy is getting dispersed and it's getting dispersed in a wave action that's generating and propagating out in all directions. And some of those waves are already reaching the coastline of the United States along the southeast coast. And even as we check in with Derek Lytle, our reporter down in the Outer Banks, we'll see that the wave action is certainly more pronounced there, and that's also creating the overwash conditions in parts of the Outer Banks. Still have Hurricane Hunter aircraft out surveying the storm, and they've been pretty much in the storm nonstop since last Thursday. They rebased out at St. Croix Wednesday, and they've been running pretty much constant missions. I think we're at mission number 24, 25. Between NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft and U.S. Air Force reserves constantly in the storm, giving us new information, input into the computer models to maintain a pretty good trajectory on the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone here with not much deviation. It has deviated in terms of the timing and when the turn did come, but overall the projection here off to the north has maintained over the last couple of days, several days really. All right, so sea surface temperatures here out ahead of Erin. In fact, it's interacting with it now, which as you'll see the hurricane track here, it does indicate a brief little jump in intensity, most likely because of the favorable sea surface temperature environment here. Very, very warm waters. We've got a marine heat wave ongoing in this part of the Southwest Atlantic extending down to the Bahamas, and that's exceptionally warm water temperatures, 85, 86, 87 degree water temperatures here. Pair that with favorable upper level dynamics, and we'll likely see a little burst in intensification here. So don't be surprised if you see the wind speeds go up a bit over the next 24 hours. Now, in regard to the ocean heat content, how deep the warm water extends, it's over an area right now that's not all that deep. So that's a problem for the storm to maintain a strong presence because it mixes up the waters of the ocean, upwelling, and it will be mixing up cooler ocean waters from a depth. And that was a problem about 24 hours ago when it was moving so slow. It was sitting over the same water, so it used up a lot of that heat energy there. And in the days to come, as we get the updates from the sea surface temperature anomalies, we'll likely see a pretty pronounced sea surface temperature scar shaped up here. And that's just from all of the heat energy that's been essentially sucked out of the ocean and used as wind energy for the storm as it built up its intensity over the last week. Now, the waves are no joke, okay? Look at this buoy that's pretty much due east of the center of Erin, putting out a 36-foot wave. In fact, just a couple minutes ago, that was up to 39 feet. So this is a massive wave generator, and these are propagating out. And even off to the north, we're starting to get some buoys pick up 12, 15-foot waves, and these aren't even all that far offshore of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. In fact, there's another buoy right there, pretty close to shore, indicating 12-foot waves. We got another one here off the South Carolina coast, 11-foot waves. So that wave action is propagating out and reaching the coast. This is preceding any arrival of strong winds. So we're going to have wave action that's going to be damaging to coastal ecosystems and environmental coastal ecosystems and just the overall geography of the coastlines here over the next couple of days as its slow movement to the north does continue. Again, a look here at infrared satellite imagery over the last couple of hours. Out ahead of the arrival of some of the stronger winds, there are tropical alerts out for the continental United States, and this is for eastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia. Tropical storm watches here upgrade to a tropical storm warning down to the south, where impacts will be a little more imminent here within the next 36 hours of seeing tropical storm force conditions arriving there. We'll likely see that upgraded to a warning here off towards the north in southeastern Virginia. All right, here's a couple of the cameras. This is out Highway 12, NC 12 in North Carolina along the Outer Banks near Buxton. And you can see NC 12 here seeing some overwash coming in from the ocean and moving on over, displacing some of the dunes there. They have plenty of infrastructure in place and plenty of a machinery to fill that back on in when it is deemed safe to do so. But we're going to see more and more of this as we get closer to the arrival of Erin. Another look here at Highway 12, Hatteras out at Frisco. Here's Highway 12. You can see some water overwash already coming in over those dunes there. The water is not far away from the road surface there. And a lot of times we see whole chunks of this part of NC 12 just get completely washed away and it needs to be rebuilt. And they're just used to it in that part of North Carolina along the Outer Banks. So after a quick break, folks, we're going to go out live to the Outer Banks with Derek Lytle, who's down in Buxton, for a look at those conditions before we get the setting sun. Latest forecast track coming out from the National Hurricane Center here as of the 5 o'clock advisory, and a breakdown of all the expected impacts along the southeast and mid-Atlantic with Erin building north. So we'll see you back here in just a couple minutes. Welcome back, folks. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I want to bring in now Derek Lytle, who's a 13 News Now reporter reporting for us live down through the Outer Banks. He's currently out at Buxton right now. Derek, how are we doing out there this evening?
Yeah, hey, Tim, I heard you mention it. Just the sheer power of these waves, this ocean, what it can do is just breathtaking. We've actually gone off the sticks, got rid of the tripod because it has brushed us back. You can see it's just taken out some of this fencing, and the dozens of sandbags here stand no chance against the power of this ocean. It's honestly, for lack of better terms, just breathtaking what the power of this storm is bringing just ahead of tomorrow and Thursday as locals kind of brace and prepare. Now, I want to walk you back. Like we had said, we are in Buxton, just outside of where two of the long-standing motels here are in the area, and we did talk to a local school teacher who said that oftentimes they ride these storms out because trying to get off of 12 and then get back, that road could become closed for 4 or 5 days, maybe even several weeks, and then they're out hotel money and other elements, and they're supposed to start school next Monday, and they're just not quite sure what the plan is as we await this. I want to bring you over to the main road here where the motels sit, and you're going to see quite the amount of overwash like we had talked about already overtaking. Again, the strength of those waves actually brushed us back. We were standing over there. That's where we wanted to bring you just the main part of our coverage, but out of being safe and just staying on top of it, decided to move away from that, and we're going to push over here. And you can see the Outer Banks Motel right here, along with the Hatteras Motel, long-standing in the community. Owners known for half a century. You can see it's just overtaken the main drive here. It's quite astonishing, really. I did talk to a rep from North Carolina Transportation, and they said that all of the roadway on 12 is still passable. People have been able to get by throughout most of the afternoon and early evening. However, they're really worried for tomorrow at high tides. The two high tides, one in the morning and one at night. When we get to that high tide at night, they're worried 12 is no longer going to be open. It's going to be shut down. They said it could be shut down through Sunday. That's what some of the locals that have lived here for decades tell me. You can see just this water overcoming this motel. A lot of people, we talked to a couple from the Hampton Roads area. They say their children start school on Monday, and out of concern for their safety, they packed it on up and they headed home to get out of here before those roads closed down. Tim, just breathtaking to see just the start of the impacts here. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, Derek, well, we still got you. So we're expecting, the peak tidal flooding, the biggest impacts from Erin along the Outer Banks in southeastern Virginia, about 36 hours out from now, and seeing overwash conditions already preceding the arrival of any of the winds. Does that have any of the residents that you've talked to kind of worried? And also, have you seen any damage to structures yet?
Yeah, Tim, we haven't seen direct structural damage. I know the water's already overtaking some of the units, and people have chosen to remove themselves from that situation. But a lot of the locals we talked to say they've been through this before, and this community is ready for this. They said it comes with part of the territory of living where they want to live. They say they love living here, and this community really rallies around each other. And they share back and forth with what stores have enough for people to get by, and make sure that they're not overtaking those stores so that can get through it. A lot of these parts, they say it would be more costly and more devastating for them to try and uproot and leave the community and not staying. So, Tim, it's just a message of they're scared, they're nervous, and they want to get through Sunday. They think if they can get through the weekend and trying to get 12 back open, everyone I've talked to said 12 is going to close. I mean, that's bottom line. That's what they're saying. So they just want to get through this weekend, Tim.
Yeah, folks down through the Outer Banks are hardened. This isn't the first hurricane they've experienced, and it certainly won't be the last either. Derek, we thank you for your coverage out there. Stay safe, and we'll check in again with you on the TV side at 11 o'clock tonight on 13 News Now. All right, let's get over to the hurricane track from the Hurricane Center that came out at 5 o'clock with the 8 o'clock numbers on it as well. 105-mile-per-hour winds. It's down to a Category 2, so you may look at that and say, well, it's a weaker storm. Yes, the overall intensity, the wind speeds have gone down, but the wind field has gotten much, much bigger. And as it moves to the north, that will continue to be this case. It will expand in size. Track hasn't changed. It's still passing well offshore, the center of Erin. But as we look closely, we do have tropical alerts up for coastal areas and even extending a little bit farther west and inland because that wind field will move over land here as we get into Wednesday, tomorrow, and Thursday before it pushes on off towards the east and northeast. Okay, spaghetti plots here, very much in agreement. You can see them all falling in line with the forecast cone from the Hurricane Center. Even as we get closer to the tail end of that cone, when typically it's larger, you see the cone is larger at that point because uncertainty is higher, confidence a little bit lower, but even the majority of those spaghetti plots falling within that. Yeah, there are a few outliers, but these are even farther out into the open Atlantic, so not a worry there. The threat for any westward track closer to the coastline, I think, has passed. All right, let's compare the two models now, the GFS and the European. The European, the red, the GFS is the yellow. Hard to see the GFS because both models lining up perfectly right on top of one another. Excellent model agreement here in the short term, and notice both jogging it to the north. Now, as we get to Thursday, and it's parked on its closest approach of the eastern seaboard of the U.S., European is slightly farther to the west, does bring in some stronger winds to the Outer Banks, maybe into northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, eastern shore of Virginia up into the Delmarva. GFS still does bring those winds in too, but it's set up a little bit farther to the east. Now, for reference, there's Bermuda. Looks like Bermuda is going to miss out on a lot of this action. It's going to come closer to the U.S. East Coast than it will to Bermuda, but overall a very, very large storm. And then it moves east and northeast and picks up speed as it begins an extratropical transition and loses some of those tropical characteristics as we get into this weekend. So Hurricane Erin now is a Category 2. Let's talk about our impacts as we get into Wednesday and Thursday as it gets closer to land and begins to really cause some issues in coastal conditions, in coastal communities. Rainfall with this, I don't expect much at all. Showers around maybe the Outer Banks, some outermost bands working on in there, but this will not be a prolific rainmaker, which is unusual for a tropical storm. And of course, that's the main reason is because it's passing by off to our east. Typically, the heaviest of the rain is going to be found on the eastern side of the storm in most cases, and we're not going to have that impacting land, which is some good news here. So freshwater flooding, not going to be a problem. It's going to be a wind, waves, and tides event for us, tidal flooding event for us. So wind, tropical storm force winds at the highest will be along the immediate coast, Outer Banks, Virginia coastal locations, and maybe even up towards New England if it does track a little bit farther to the north and west there. That's gusts 39 to maybe 50 miles per hour, maybe a little bit higher in areas along the Outer Banks that are farthest to the east, closer to the center of Erin. Waves will be prolific. You already saw that there were waves being produced that are close to 40 feet. Those are all propagating towards the coastline. I'll show you a forecast wave heights in just a second. And then tides, we're looking at 4 separate high tide cycles. Wednesday night's high tide, Thursday morning and evening, and then again, even into Friday's high tide. That's going to bring about some pretty significant tidal surges in there. And also, we're going to talk about coastal surge or storm surge, especially along the Outer Banks as we get closer to Thursday. All right, rainfall potential, just to show you here, model outputs is not much. Hatteras at the most, maybe up to an inch. I think that might even be pushing it. The wind field for this, as it passes between Bermuda and the East Coast, I mean, it almost covers the entire area here. Notice the tropical storm force winds, which is this yellow outer lobe up to 39 mile per hour winds or greater, does brush up against the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So just a glancing blow. This is the Hurricane Center product here based on that storm track. It does track a little farther to the west, just 10, 20 miles. That would have big implications for areas that see stronger winds. But overall, I think it's the wind energy here that's producing the massive waves that's going to cause the most problems with the overwash, with the coastal erosion as we get on into Wednesday and Thursday. Here's a look at those wind speeds with putting a number on it. You saw tropical storm force winds that were extending out to the Outer Banks, and here's verification of that. We could see gusts up and over 50, 55, maybe even 60 miles per hour if the storm's a little bit stronger than anticipated, stretching farther to the north and northwest Virginia Beach area, up and over 30 miles per hour. And it will remain blustery right through the day on Thursday into Thursday night. And even as it begins to pull away to the north and east, we'll keep that wind out of the north. That'll be blustery through Friday. Now, wave heights here. This is tonight, and we're already seeing huge waves getting generated and propagating out to the north and meeting the coastlines of North and South Carolina, up to 5 to 10 foot waves reaching the coastline there already. But notice these numbers jumping as we start to gain latitude. By midday tomorrow, still seeing 10-foot waves, but just offshore here, 18-footers, and then it just grows from there. As we get into Thursday morning, Thursday midday, 20-foot waves off of Kill Devil Hills, 24-foot waves possibly off of Cape Hatteras, getting up to 12-foot waves off the Virginia Beach coastline. And then even by Thursday afternoon, as the storm pulls away, wave action will remain. Very rough surf here with coastal erosion and beach erosion, that kind of thing persisting for a couple of days. Now let's talk about the storm surge, because that's almost an under-communicated risk here with this storm. Now we've got a storm surge threat here along the Outer Banks of 2, 3, maybe 4 feet. You may think of that, that's not a huge deal. Yeah, but if you've been to the Outer Banks, the majority of the average elevation of the Outer Banks is between 5 and 10 feet above sea level. So a lot of the areas are at or even below sea level in some locations. So even up to a 4-foot surge will be significant. A lot of houses down through the Outer Banks here, which certainly will be threatened by this storm as it pulls on through here. So the bottom line overall, Erin stays offshore, but because it'll be so large, the wind field will be so large, as well as the satellite presentation, the impacts to the U.S. are expected. Fringe effects Wednesday through Thursday, and even up towards New England. You get to Martha's Vineyard, Narragansett, areas like that, Cape Cod, maybe some fringe effects for you as well. Now, lingering surf and rip current risk, that's another big threat from the entire eastern seaboard through this upcoming weekend. So you have beach plans this weekend. Yeah, the waves will be rough, but the rip current risk is certainly going to be high. Now, elsewhere in the Atlantic, we started this video, or the stream, talking about how we've got 2 other waves out there. We've got one here that's out in the middle parts of the main development region that's got a 60% chance here of developing into our next named storm, which, by the way, is Fernand, the 6th named storm. But notice this also takes almost a recurve out to sea path. And also it's going to be encountering not the best environmental conditions. It looks like wind shear will kick up as it gets into this area as well, and it looks to recurve as well. So maybe a threat to Bermuda here. We'll have to watch it as we get into this weekend to see if it does develop at all. But it's really the wave behind it that just came off the coast of Africa, a very robust African easterly wave. It's already been tagged as Invest 99L. Remember, that means investigative area. 99 is a recording number. It goes 90 to 99, and then we recycle back. So after this one, it'll be 90. And the L means it's in the Atlantic Basin. 30% chances in 2 days, 30% in 7. So not overall huge odds yet, but at this early in the stage to get tagged already with a low odds, models do favor this one to develop. And it's just too early to tell where it's going to be and if it would be a threat to any land at all. So since it has been tagged as an invest, we do get model plots on this. So we've got the first run of spaghetti models here showing that this will be what we call a low ride or a low latitude signal on this one, kind of moving very far to the south, and possibly if it does get into the southern portion of the Leeward and Windward Islands. We've seen storms like this before that brush the northern coast of South America here. This may be one of those we'll have to watch, and if it does hold together, getting into the Caribbean in about 8, 9, 10 days time. So a lot of time to watch it, but that's what we're going to be focused on there. So we're going to take another quick break here, folks, and when we get back, we're going to check in with our partners on how folks are continuing to prepare and what they can expect across other areas across the Southeast. Welcome back. New tonight on Hurricane Hub Live, we're hearing from one of the hurricane hunters themselves who flew in Hurricane Erin. This video behind me, captured by the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, shows the crew flying through the eye of the storm, something called the stadium effect you see there. Let's hear how it was done.
Well, we come at it and we get to see it from a perspective that's somewhat unique in that we're flying through it and gathering data, and we're not at immediate risk as we fly through it. So it's really a spectacular thing to be able to see the power of the hurricane from that unique perspective. So Erin, as it traversed the Atlantic, very rapidly intensified into a Cat 4, Cat 5, and it had a very, very small, tight eye for a day or two. And the stadium effect is when you're down in the eye of the hurricane and you can look at those massive wall of clouds that are surrounding you, like you're standing on the floor of a football stadium and just looking up. You see those bleachers rising above you. And so that's what it's like being in the storm, is you're just looking up with these massive walls all around you. We fly these missions because there's data that is important for the forecasters, that's vital to the forecast models, that cannot be gathered through any other means. Satellites give a good big picture of where storms may be developing, but ultimately to make the most accurate forecast, you need that in-person data that can only be gathered by flying through the storm. So that's why we do what we do. We fly a variant of the regular C-130 aircraft that's flown by the U.S. Air Force and militaries around the world. Our aircraft is modified with a variety of additional sensors and additional fuel tanks that allow us to fly these very long endurance missions through the storm environments. The aircraft is really a flying sensor platform. It's gathering data all along the course through the hurricane at flight level. We're dropping instruments down through to get a vertical profile of what's going on. That data is sent back up to the aircraft via radio link and then sent to the National Hurricane Center via satellite communication. And then additionally, we have sensors that are looking at the sea surface. They're giving that surface level data. Then yesterday, we were additionally dropping buoys that were going in the water in a large grid ahead of the storm. And those are giving a very high fidelity view of what's going on with the sea surface. The ocean is the sort of fuel tank for hurricanes. And that interaction between the atmosphere and ocean is very important to understand. So the aircraft is really a regular C-130 that's just turned into a big vacuum cleaner for information.
Now we continue our team coverage from the Outer Banks with Alex Littlehales, just beyond the Virginia state line in Currituck County.
Under still sunny and blue skies, drivers are on their way out, heading north on 158 off of the Outer Banks. Some residents are gassing up, though, for when stormy skies approach.
I'm right in the middle, so
Yes.
So yeah, it's a just in case kind of thing. Plus, I know everybody's trying to leave, so wanted to get gas before it's too busy.
Where Melissa Zahner lives isn't under Dare County's mandatory evacuation. She's gassing up the family car in case that changes.
This tank of gas will probably get me. My kids and my husband are already gone. That was a trip that was planned. It'll get me to Newport News to my best friend's house.
A different story from Frank Draper, who had to cut his Hatteras Island fishing trip short today.
We were supposed to say maybe we're going to stay the night, but we decided not to.
Vacationers and locals across the Outer Banks are now adjusting their plans. In an announcement Tuesday afternoon, Currituck County leadership recommended visitors in Corova, the beach community beyond the town of Corolla and just below the Virginia state line, to leave. It's not a mandatory evacuation, and the county isn't even in a state of emergency. But they believe the four-wheel drive beach road, the only way in and out of the neighborhood, may be impassable this Thursday, calling travel dangerous from storm surge and high surf. Coming from someone who's lived through evacuations before.
There are people that have to stay down there. They have to stay. And for those people who have to stay, everyone who doesn't have to stay should.
Venturing a little farther south, Dare County leaders continue to urge residents to take their warnings seriously. Right now, evacuation orders are in place for Hatteras and Ocracoke Island, where significant storm surges are expected. Emily Harrison has the latest from the Outer Banks as residents and tourists choose to either hunker down or evacuate.
This is what U.S. Highway 158 North looked like Tuesday morning as residents and tourists alike left North Carolina.
It's imperative that any visitor on Hatteras Island who have not yet evacuated to do so immediately.
Right now, only Hatteras and Ocracoke Island residents and visitors are mandated to evacuate. But several Outer Banks County leaders say this evacuation order could extend to other parts if the trajectory of the storm changes.
So the local leaders are meeting regularly and putting out bulletins to the municipalities from the county. So we're staying informed and staying connected with regular updates, informing of actions that need to be taken for each area.
For areas not under evacuation like Kitty Hawk and Nags Head, Dare County leaders are urging caution. Double red flags are posted prohibiting any swimming, but several surfers still showed up to feel Hurricane Erin's impact. And visiting tourists say they are unsure whether or not they'll cut their vacation short.
It didn't concern me too much because it looked like it was more on the southern part of the Outer Banks, but it might hit up here. If that's the case, well, that's luck of the draw.
It's been a good experience, but we don't want to be here when it hits because we don't know what that'll be like.
In the meantime, Dare County officials say that they will continue to stockpile equipment and sandbags as they say that they are going to continue to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. In the Outer Banks, I'm Emily Harrison, 13 News Now.
Well, taking a live look over Virginia Beach oceanfront where city officials are gearing up for potential impacts from Hurricane Erin. Brianna Fallon breaks down the details.
Right now, the city of Virginia Beach is keeping a close eye on coastal areas around the city. That's due to the potential for heavy winds and coastal flooding.
Waves were really rough, so I could tell that it's probably a lot riskier if you're spending time right on the main ocean.
That's because of Hurricane Erin. The city of Virginia Beach says along the Virginia coast, the Atlantic Ocean could have waves reach 8 to 12 feet high tomorrow, with waves in the Chesapeake Bay potentially reaching anywhere from 6 to 8 feet high, resulting in the potential for coastal flooding. Chris Drew is vacationing in Sandbridge. He's hoping hurricane impacts will not change his plans this week.
So we'll make a decision depending on if anything gets worse and flooding gets worse. We may have to leave early.
But coastal flooding is not the only impact Drew in the city of Virginia Beach could see from Hurricane Erin. That's why Dave Topsinski, the director of emergency management for the city, says he and his team are taking steps to prepare ahead of the storm. But he says so should you.
Securing loose objects, bringing in those lawn chairs, grills, securing garbage cans, toys, stuff like that in the yard, having that secured up so it's not blowing around or blowing in neighbors' homes or vehicles.
But checking in on drains and having high water response vehicles ready are some of the ways the city is preparing in advance for any possible impacts. Topsinski says while folks living on the coast might be used to coastal flooding and these kinds of threats from Hurricane Erin, he says this is not the time to let your guard down.
Everybody says it's not going to happen to me till it does, so at least take the bare minimum precautions and pay attention.
Brianna Fallon, 13 News Now.
Hurricane Erin approaches, renters and homeowners in Virginia Beach are taking action, sharing how they're preparing and the impacts they expect. Shane Fordham spoke with renters about steps they're taking ahead of the storm.
As Hurricane Erin is closing in, local renters aren't taking any chances as they say they're preparing for the worst while hoping for the best.
We're expecting and anticipating the worst just to prepare ourselves and our tenants and our properties.
Homeowners in Virginia Beach share their concerns about the coming storm as well.
Well, definitely with the flooding, water coming in through the doors and even a tree falling on the house.
Telephone wires could go down, you could lose power.
Definitely property damage, of course, making sure that, any siding coming off, roof damage, any tree limbs, stuff like that.
Director of Property Management for Abrams Realty, Madison Numi, says they are concerned about the storm impacts for several of their Virginia Beach properties, but are advising their tenants on weathering the storm as they haven't had many canceled move-ins or stays.
For tenants, we notified them that if there are any, if they ever leave the area for the hurricane, if they have to evacuate, letting us know when they're leaving and when they're returning. Of course, making sure that all their blinds are closed, making sure all patio furniture is up, anything like that.
Numi says they are prepared to support their tenants through the potential impacts.
Our job is to manage properties, and as you know and everyone knows, hurricanes cause damage, and we're just hoping that we get lucky and it doesn't do a lot of damage, and if it does, we're on it.
In Virginia Beach, Shane Fordham, 13 News Now.
Well, it's time now for Hurricane Hub Live trivia. Yesterday's question I asked, so which hurricane in the satellite era, 1966 and onwards, has spent the most time as a Category 5? Was it Erin, Katrina, Irma, or Jose? Correct answer, Irma, back in 2017. Check out its track. It's spent an astounding amount of time as a major hurricane. A Category 5 hurricane. 77 hours to be exact. Pretty much the entire length of the Caribbean there before it turned north along the the west coast of Florida. All right, let's take a look at tonight's trivia question. In what year did the first Hurricane Hunter flight take place? We had Hurricane Hunters on the show tonight. Was it in 1965, 1943, 1977, or 1942? The answer revealed tomorrow night at 8 p.m. on Hurricane Hub Live. Make sure to join us here every weekday, every day actually, 7 days a week at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. Have a great night.